In the horror genre, it is typical for the location to be the first thing that is introduced. Establishing shots are used to present the location, especially when the location changes. For example, in Night of the Living Dead, establishing shots are used every time the location changes to assist with audience comprehension. More recently, The House of Wax does this as well. I believed it crucial to abide by this convention. In my opening sequence, there are multiple establishing shots, for example, the house or the bedroom. My chosen setting is not that of a normal horror, but for a paranormal horror, my chosen subgenre, it was a conventional location. Paranormal horrors from Poltergeist to The Conjuring utilize the home as a setting, as it has the ability to manipulate the audience's view of their own home, which is normally seen as a safe place. What these horrors do is they challenge the view of the audience so that they fear their own home. I wanted to achieve this effect with my horror, and therefore question my target audience on it. The feedback informed me that my audience thought similarly to me and wanted a relatable location. However, woodland was closely followed, so with target audience in mind, I weaved part of the story to include the woodland around a house. If this were to be a full-length production, I would include more story in the woodlands as well. In terms of my character, my protagonist is introduced by simply walking through a door. I wanted her to come across as fully capable and strong, and most of all, normal. By having a normal protagonist, it can have the connotational value that this horror can happen to anyone. I chose a far more Scream-like approach on it, in that my protagonist is shown to be a strong modern female, but has that ripped away from her soon enough. Although the gender of a female is usually associated with vulnerability, the fact my protagonist is doing physical labor challenges that stereotype. But, much like the girl from Scream, by the time the horror is apparent, my protagonist curls up like a baby, cowering a little. For my antagonist, I chose a male figure in a dark hood. This resembles a modern adaptation of the satanic cults that reigned terror through the 70s and 80s in the North of America. The idea of this sort of activity in England brings an element of fear in itself, and not an unrealistic one at that. The sacrifice, on the other hand, is also male, so I subverted the male power role in the hallucination scene to place discomfort in my male audience. Both characters are introduced abruptly through the hallucination to instill discomfort about both. As of here, it is difficult to decipher who is the antagonist, the masked man, now spirit, or the murderer, or both. In the first part of my opening sequence, and the hallucination scene, I darkened the shots in the editing process using filters from Final Cut Pro. The effect of this is to show the difference in reality between the protagonist's point of view and that of the spirit within the mask. The connotation of this is that the first few shots show an advancement on the house from the woods. So, perhaps, with its new owners, the spirit has come back to wreak havoc in the house. This is one of the several enigma codes I have arisen in my opening sequence. Another would be, what happened to the cultist? Why are his belongings still here if he is not? These questions are vital to keep my audience interested and curious. To give her a taster of the explanation to this, the hallucination scene itself not only answers who does this stuff belong to, but also acts as a genre indicator and raises further questions about the murder. Sound was a crucial part of my opening sequence, as it is with all horror films. A mixture of sound effects and soundtracks gave my opening sequence the eerie ambience I set out to create. For example, the string tracks I used in the first half minute or so are typical of that of horrors, which I was commended on by my audience in their feedback. Similarly, the sound effects of the screams and hellish atmosphere made the hallucination scene the effective horror part I needed. Without that scene being the way it was, it would be difficult to define my horror from a dark thriller or something of that nature. In terms of my title, I chose Eucharist for several reasons. The actual word Eucharist refers to the communion in the Christian faith, but I use it in a way that gives the connotational value of satanic ritual, not a weekly God-praising one. Furthermore, one-word horror films are often appealing, as they don't reveal much about the story. Insidious, for example, the title tells you nothing about the story. To keep to the nature of the title and the theme, I chose a font for it that was both old and creepy. It resembles the sort of text that would be seen on old religious relics, similar to that of the title of The Exorcist.